In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to resize an image in Photoshop, maintain the best quality, and get it to the exact size that you need for different things. Hey Cafe crew, Colin Smith here from photoshopcafe.com, and welcome to part 2 of our two-part series on image size and resolution. So if you don't understand resolution, what all of that means, check out part 1 where I explain it in very simple terms so you'll finally understand why some images look bigger than others, but then on screen they're not the size you expect, why sometimes they print smaller than you thought, all these kind of things. I explain it to you in part 1. Part 2 now is where we're going to go in and we're going to talk about resizing images. How do we resize an image and get the best possible quality? And also, how do we get to a specific size? So in order to do that, we're going to be using this image here, and I'm going to provide a download link so you guys can actually download this image. And this is an image I prepared especially for this because it's got different things. Notice we've got thin lines around the outside. We've got a thicker line here. We've got diagonal lines. We've got a gradient. We've got curved lines. We've got type, big type. We've got small type down there, and a photograph. And so the reason I created this image is so we can see how image resizing affects different image types in different ways, because one size does not always fit all. So in the previous lesson, we determined resolution. So once again, if you haven't seen that video, read those steps, check it out. The actual size of the image here is 939 pixels. As long as we turn off resample, resolution here is just a hypothetical amount. Right now it says 300, and if I change it to 82, which is screen resolution, notice it doesn't change the dimensions. It changes the inches. If I make it 1,000, it changes that. So these are just hypothetical numbers that really only affect rulers. And if you want to understand what I mean by that, check out the last video. So what if we actually want to change the size of the image, as in the dimensions? If we want to make this image bigger, or we want to make it smaller? Well, this is where we turn on resample. And now when we turn on resample, if we change these numbers, it's going to change the dimensions. Now make sure this chain link is on, like there, and now that's going to constrain the proportions. So say, for example, you wanted to go to 300 pixels per inch for print, and you want to give this a height of 5 inches. Notice I've selected inches there. Notice what it would need to do. It would need to change the dimensions of this to 1511 by 1500. So this would almost have to double the size of this image. So here's the thing. When we have an image, it's very easy to scale down the image without losing quality. When we scale it up, we lose quality. Whenever we change the size of an image, we lose quality. Because what happens is we are resampling. Let me describe. If I change it by 1 pixel, say we have a 1,000 pixel image, and I change it to 1,001 pixels, Photoshop has to go through and figure out how to redistribute every single one of those pixels to make it fit. So the minute you're changing the size here, you are going to be reducing the quality. The good news is there's great tools inside of Photoshop that can do this incredibly well without losing very much quality at all. In fact, you won't even discern the loss of quality a lot of the time. So before we even resize this, let's talk about this. And this is known as interpolation. Interpolation is how Photoshop resizes the images. Let's look at the different ways of interpolating. And this is known as the algorithms. So if you want to get technical, these are interpolation algorithms, or just other ways of sizing the images. So let's have a look here. But let's talk about all these different ones. The easiest way for me to describe these is, let's make number 1 this a little bigger so we can see this image. I don't know if you knew this, but we can make this nice and big. And look at this image. And we want to be displaying it at 100%. The reason we want to display it at 100% is this an accurate view. If you're at a different magnification, you're not getting an accurate view. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this down a little bit so we can look at different parts of the image. This is why I included these other parts in here. So that we can see how the fine lines, the diagonal lines, because horizontal and vertical lines work really well, but notice when we go into diagonals, sometimes they can start to look soft. Curves can get weird. All right, so we're looking at that, plus we've got this gradient, and of course a photo. So these are all the different elements that you're going to be dealing with when you're working in photos. So why don't we just start from the very bottom here, and I'm going to explain what these do. And the reason I'm going to start with these first three is originally these were the three that were in Photoshop for many, many years. So if we start with nearest neighbor, notice the photo is going to look really blocky. These are going to be very, very sharp, but not smooth. See that? The curves, not very smooth. So essentially what nearest neighbor does is imagine you've got the pixel, it looks at the 4 pixels around it that are touching it. To the left, to the right, to the top and the bottom. It looks at those and says, okay, I have to rebuild this image. How do I redistribute these pixels? What color should they be? And it looks at those 4 and takes an average of them and then creates that. This is good for very, very hard-edged work. If you look at these blocky things like these squares here, look very crisp. But the minute you get curves, angles, not so good. The second one, bilinear. Bilinear actually looks really good for line art. And it also works very good for fonts, text, things like that. Now, obviously I'm going really high with this, this 1500, but this is going to make it really easy to see what's going on. So we can see that looks a lot better. Now, bilinear, what that does is that looks at the 8 pixels around. So that's the 3 across the top, 3 across the bottom, 1 to the left and 1 to the right. So all the surrounding pixels, it looks at those and determines what's going to give the best result. Looks good on line art. Little soft on photos sometimes. A little pixely. Look at these artifacts that we can see around the edges there. Always look for the edges of images, and that's where you can see interpolation artifacts. Artifacts are these kind of squishy things. You'll notice it on Netflix. I'll probably ruin Netflix for you forever, but when you're watching streaming TV, when you see a character walking across the screen, look around the edge of them and you'll see you'll see the compression right there. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is the third one that was put in here was bicubic. And bicubic is or was the best for photographs and gradients. So if we go up here into this gradient, look how smooth that is. These are not looking as good. In fact, if I go back to the bilinear, those lines are probably looking a little bit sharper. So originally we had these 3 here. So it's basically, we want to use bilinear for line art, type, things like that, bicubic for photos. Then in Photoshop, I believe CS3, they added 2 more. Bicubic sharpener and bicubic smoother. So bicubic sharpener sharpens the image ever so slightly. So that means if we're reducing the size of it, it's going to maintain that sharpness. Of course, here it's not looking great. It's looking a little crunchy. Look at the edges. Not fantastic. But then there was also another one called bicubic smoother. Bicubic smoother, notice this. When we're enlarging a photograph, see how the photo looks better now? It looks smoother. Not, the type and stuff is starting to look a little soft. See that? The gradients are smooth, but the crisp edges look soft, but it works very, very well for photographs. And the bicubic, and how this works is it takes those 8 surrounding ones, plus it takes 8 more adjacent ones, and it looks at those 16 pixels all the way around, and it uses them to figure out, okay, what is the best color for this pixel? So it looks out further, and it makes a better determination, which creates smoother gradients, smoother blends, because it's looking further out into the image. Okay, so why are there these other 2 in here? Well, then they went to preserve details. Preserve details was added in CS6. If we look at preserve details, ooh, look how much better that photo is looking already. Looks a lot better. So this was a newer algorithm that does a little bit more and definitely looks better. Adds a little sharpening on those edges. Now, what does automatic do? So what Automatic does is if you reduce the size, it uses bicubic sharpener. And if you increase the size, it uses preserve details enlargement. So there's one more that's been added more recently in Photoshop CC, and that's preserve details 2. Watch this. Look at that. It's even better. It got rid of the artifacts. It got rid of the noise. And this is going to almost double. I can actually make this image look bigger now without losing so much quality. Now there's one caveat. If we look at it here, you know, the type and stuff might be a little bit softer. It's looking pretty good here, but let's have a look here. Maybe if we compare this to bicubic smoother. It's actually sharper. So if we look at preserve details 2, this looks better for the type and it looks better for the image. So what is this? So what this is it's actually using Adobe Sensei. It's using AI. So instead of just going out and looking at certain pixels and applying a certain algorithm, it's actually looking at the image and the AI is analyzing the image and rebuilding this entire image. And because we do this, we can do it without getting the artifacts and we get a much better result. And if we've got the reduced noise turned up, if we turn this down, you can see that it doesn't soften some of those edges quite so much. It's subtle. But if you look, you can see there, all the way up. Turn it down, you can see some of these areas like the earrings, look at that. Turn it up, it gets fills it in a little bit. Shows the detail a little bit more when you turn it down. So let's go up here. There's our edges there, watch this. See how that just cleans it up? So you might want to play around in here to get the right setting. But as you can see, using this Preserve Details 2.0 is absolutely incredible. So if you're working in the latest version of Photoshop, you pretty much want to be using this all the time. If you're using Photoshop CS6, if you are enlarging, use Preserve Details. If you're using an earlier version in CS6, use bicubic smoother. And if you're dropping the size, do bicubic sharpener. Now, there's one caveat to all of this. Sometimes, if you're in here and you're changing the size of these images with photographs, and you don't like how this looks, if it looks too smooth and too artificial, bicubic smoother here also creates a very smooth result, although it's a little soft. So if you don't like the result you're getting with the Preserve Details 2, then use bicubic smoother on your photos and then just apply a little bit of sharpening when you're done. All right, so that's algorithms. All right, so we've now significantly increased the size of this image and look at the quality of it. It's pretty good. I mean, it's not as super sharp as it was before, but it's definitely usable. Let's undo this. So there we go, we look at that 100%. It's definitely sharper. So one of the things you probably don't want to be doing unless you absolutely have to is enlarging an image that big. So I suggest if you're going to be working and you know you're going to need it in a really large size, you want to be working in a high resolution format. So that means if you bring a photo in and you're going to be creating something like this, you want to build it around the size of that photo. So don't shrink the photo down when you do this composition. Build the document around it and make everything nice and big, because it's easier to shrink an image than it is to enlarge it. Although in a jam, you can enlarge it like we just did. So if we wanted to say, for example, someone hit you up and said, I want this at 800 pixels wide, please. This is how you would do it. You would choose image, image size, go down here. You can see it's 939 pixels wide. Change this 2 pixels, type in 800. Now you could put this on for automatic if you want, where it's just going to choose the bicubic sharpener. There's a bicubic sharper is there. But let's also have a look at Preserve Details 2. Looks really good. In fact, let's look up here. Looking nice. And then we go here and we're going to choose bicubic sharper. Really hard to tell the difference. So Preserve Details is just incredible with this AI. But once again, if it looks weird, remember everything else we've talked about and use these other settings here. So we got 939 by 932. So we need to make this 939 by 939 or 932 by 932. That's the only way we can get that to that size. So here's something that's really interesting. A lot of people don't know this, and this is in Photoshop 2020. When you're working in a flattened document, notice here we've got our width and height. If we unconstrain that, and I type in 939, and then I click, watch this. This just added those pixels to the image. Let's have a look. Now it's 939 by 939. So you can actually change the canvas size right here. All right, so there we go. We've just resized that canvas right there. It's pretty incredible. So now if we could choose image and we choose image size and we go to pixels, we go to 800. Now we can go to 800 by 800. Let's look at another example. Okay, so we want to print this at say a 6 by 10. So if we type in the height of 6, we can see it's a little bit bigger than 10 there. If we type in 10, we can see it's smaller than 6. So we definitely need it bigger. So let's choose 6, and then we just got to get rid of a few pixels. So let's click OK. So here we are. So what we can do is we can grab our crop tool. And under our crop tool, notice it sets to pixels per inch right now. We can change this centimeters or inches, but what's really important is we want to go here and set width, height, and resolution. So what we're going to do is remember width always comes first. So we know we want 10. Make sure we put an IN for inches. Then we're going to put in 6. Put an IN for inches. And now it knows we want a 6 by 10 inches right there. See that? But it still doesn't know the resolution, so we tell it we want this to be at 300. So this is going to be print resolution. So this is our little window. We can move it around if we decide we want to have it there. And then all we need to do is click this check mark. And now if we look at it, image size, 6 by 10 at 300. So cancel. What if we wanted it to be at 72 or 82? So now it's still 6 by 10 at 82. Right now it's 3000 pixels. If I click on here, watch what happens. It'll resize it. Now it's only 800 pixels. Let's just get that to 1:1. But we're at 8 by 6 at 82. So if we wanted it that size for screen res, we could do that. However, a better way of doing this would be to just go to width, height, and resolution is going to work fine. But this time what we're going to do is we're going to do it in pixels. So say we want this 2000 pixels across. They say 1500 pixels. So if someone tells you they want this at 2000 pixels by 1500 pixels, notice it looks really weird until I put in px. Now it knows we're working in pixels. In fact, let's zoom out a little bit. And we can see that's what we're doing, cropping that to pixels. Now it doesn't really matter what we put in here because we're doing pixels. So if I do this at 300, I can set any amount in there. It doesn't matter because now we're doing pixels. Remember what we taught last week. So let's do it at 300. So if I click OK, notice now it's 2000 by 1500 pixels. That's the size we set it to. Okay, so that's how we can resize it for print and also how we can resize it for screen online. So why don't we have a look now and talk about image compression? All right, and there's one thing left that we talk about, and that's the file size. Why does the file size not matter? Well, it does matter, but it really depends on what format the image is in, depending on what the actual file size is. So saying give this to me at 10 megs or 20 megs is not even related to how large the image is, because it depends how you save the file. When you save the file as a PSD or as a TIFF, the file size is going to be larger. In fact, the largest file size you're going to get is a RAW file because there's zero compression going on. That means it's not compressing that file. It's keeping everything in its original format, which means it's really large. TIFF, PSD are known as lossless formats, unless you save with compression in TIFF, but we won't talk about that right now. But they are lossless formats, so they're a larger file size because you are not compressing the images. And this is good if you're sending something to print, or you're going to be reusing the image. So it's a production image, maybe you're passing it down a pipeline and other people are working on it. You want to work lossless, so the file sizes will be bigger. Now, if you're printing it off or you're sending it to an online printing agency, sometimes they want it as a JPEG. So let me just show you, and maybe another topic could be image compression, but I just want to quickly show you something. If we choose export here, save for web. So if we look at this image right now, we can see that this is a 4 megabyte image. So it's 4 megs. Great, that's the original. But if I choose to save this as something like a JPEG, and I go in here under optimize there, and I can see the JPEG, it's smaller. It's 299K. And that's because the JPEG compresses the image. If I turn the quality up to 100, notice that the size of the file gets bigger because there's less compression. If I take the compression all the way down, the file size is going to get tiny. It's only 66K, but notice how it's getting blocky and it's falling apart and getting artifacts because it's highly, highly compressed. So the higher the quality in a JPEG, the less compression. In fact, 100 JPEG, you're not really going to see a difference between that and a TIFF. And to be honest, you can take it to about 75 before you notice. So as you get less than 75, you start to find a balance between the file size and the quality of the image. So why wouldn't you just keep the image at highest quality all the time? Because if you're serving it on something like a website, you want it to load quickly. And that's why things like Facebook, you hear people talk about, hey, the compression on Facebook is making the photos look bad, or YouTube or whatever. You hear these terms, and that's because when they get that file, they also compress it again so it loads faster for people viewing it. So there's a balance there. So it'll load fast, but it'll be a smaller file size, but it won't look as good. All right, guys, that was a lot of information there. So we talked about resizing images. We spent a bit of time there on interpolation algorithms, like explaining what all the different things do. Hopefully that understanding is useful to you. And then also I've showed you how to scale up an image, how to scale down an image, and how to get to the right size for print. Also how to get to the right size for a digital file. Hopefully this was understandable. Let me know in the comments underneath if this helped you, if you learned anything new. Also, what would you like to learn on this series, these beginners tips, although it felt more fundamental, not so beginners today. Next week, I'll do another one. Let me know in the comments what you'd love to learn next week. So anyway, guys, if you're new here to Photoshop Cafe, hit the subscribe button and also turn on those notifications so you know when I upload a new video, and also you'll get a notification when we do our live streams each Thursday. Every Tuesday, I do a new tutorial. Every Saturday, we do a new beginners tutorial. So anyway, guys, if you like this, smash the like button into dust. And until next time, I'll see you at the cafe.